Thank you all. So we have just heard from some incredible solutions and had some really powerful examples of how this works in practice. And so right now, we're going to take a couple of steps back and have a look at the bigger question. Because whilst this is all happening in many different places, there's a real opportunity in how it connects and how it scales. So beyond individual organizations, this next section is really going to start to zoom out and look at the examples of how we create organizational progress to do things that become much more systemic rather than individualized. So to have this conversation, I'm going to welcome to the stage the Chairwoman of the Executive Board of KPMG in France. Please give a warm round of applause to Marie Guillemot. I'll give you a hug. Oh my goodness, we've really kicked off this conversation today. We have covered so many examples today. We've looked at wind power and the transformation of a whole sector. We've looked at 3 incredible examples of how different people in different organizations are thinking about across the value chain. When we take a step back and have a look at the bigger picture, what are you seeing that's encouraging in how organizations are now starting to approach sustainability across the value chain?
Well, very happy to be with you today. And yes, we could see a shift. Sustainability was a CSO-led topic. It's now becoming more and more a CEO on strategic priority. And with the context of many external pressures, we could see that the shift is even more accelerated today. And this is for the good. But yes, we see some large corporates starting to develop a sort of a systemic view on their value chain, and they are undertaking some very profound business model transformations. They have to tackle energy crisis, but also supply chain instability, tariff volatility, to name but a few, and also social impact of AI. So it's a lot, and no one could do it alone. And if you want to have long-lasting progress, you have to build them across the value chain. So this is happening now, and at KPMG, we are really happy to champion this with our clients.
And we heard it a little bit in the dialogue that we've just had with that shift from it being purely CSR-led to now, we've had a little hint of, CEOs and senior executives really getting behind the value chain and it being embedded more within an organization. We also know it tends to be difficult for organizations when they try to engage and align across stakeholders in the value chain. Where do you see some of these difficulties really coming up?
It has been very well said by all the panelists just before, and Bertrand mentioned it. It's because you have a shared ambition that you could start acting all together. But it's hard, it's a journey. And yes, aligning many different organizations across the value chain with, as you mentioned also in the panel, very different maturity levels, also different kind of skill sets or investment resources is a challenge. And even more so in context of up and downs in the economics. Because if you consider the Scope 3, you have also SMEs that have less capital and also more short-term pressure, I would say. So this is where we see a bit of a challenge. A second one is also that alignment could mean tensions between short-term pressure and long-term commitments. And here we have also good news, if we have some, with the peaks in oil and gas prices or with scarcity of water. Some changes required long-term investments with the ROI up to 10 or 20 years. But now, with the increase in prices, then the ROI is down to 5 to 7 years sometimes. And I was in this conversation last week with one of our clients. And so this kind of investment start to become high on the agenda because it would create competitive advantage in the future and also robustness. And finally, alignment means also to agree on a sort of framework to define a way of working all together, ways of measurement and transparency. And it all starts with trust. And it has been also mentioned in the panel a few minutes ago.
So we got loads of clues from the panel. We got trust from the panel. We got looking at a framework that brings everybody together. One of the things I really want to pick up that you just said, Marie, is around why now is such a good time. So we hear that it's been really challenging to bring the whole organization in, but now the ROI is so much clearer. The timelines are so much shorter because of the current energy crisis.
Yes, now it's a perfect time, if it's not too late, but it's a perfect time to have that more systemic shift. Why that is, you mentioned it, because the ROI are now really in the hands of on the corporate, but also it's because if you want your company to be performing on the long range, you have to start now and to develop, to strengthen your competitive advantage. This is the first point. And we have also recognized over the last crisis many interdependencies. And having this systemic shift across the value chain means that altogether big players, but also all the suppliers, distributors, and even consumers have to look at the interdependencies they're facing. And we see that as a lever for robustness. And like in nature, robustness means or all comes from densification and diversification of connection. So this is all about building some coalition across industries to make a change.
I'm hearing it's a really great opportunity for organizations right now to work across the value chain. What would you say fundamentally needs to change in how organizations start to think about sustainability in this era, especially when they're looking at what's actually going to work to bring their entire value chain together?
There's a lot of changes. Maybe first is really a consistent leadership over time. We heard a lot of backlash sometimes. We see changes in communication, but really this kind of shift could only happen if there is a consistent leadership in driving those programs across the value chain. This is the first point. Second one is also to share a common vision, meaning with compromise, and also alignment between objectives, incentives, and this is not always very easy. It takes time, but it's really the starting point. Some other changes is to look at the value chain with very analytical approach, meaning data, meaning transparency, and meaning common measurements. And we see that happening right now. And maybe, and it's a personal note, we need more positive narrative. And this is what I like at ChangeNOW. Solutions do exist, and the implementation means also not only conviction, but a very positive narrative so that everyone feels a bit of a hero of this change. And this is very important because you can't commit over the long range for this heavy transition without having this very positive vibe and only feel the constraint and the natural limits.
It's like a seed of hope needs to be planted within this space. When we're dealing with something as complex as this, there are so many different actors involved, right? So we're talking a value chain, which means there's loads of people involved in the value chain. Who should be leading this? Should somebody be taking the lead?
Yes, we can say that, and we see that innovation is everywhere and often comes from the edge. But I do believe that large players in these industries have a specific, special responsibility in driving this because they have the scale, the skills, and sometimes more resources. And we have very good examples of what great players have been able to do. I have some illustrations in mind. Was a leader of consumer goods sector continued to buy some packaging from his suppliers with renting warehouses during COVID. Was not to sell products. It was to support financially its suppliers. And now they have the benefit back with innovation and with strong connection with those suppliers and maybe exclusivities. So this is a good example. But you have also great players in some other industries that help their suppliers to get financing for innovation, for the hard work on finding alternative materials, for instance, or reorganizing logistic routes. And so the great players, the major players, have a sort of leading the way role.
I think what I'm also hearing in what you say is there's the ability for some of these larger players to be a lot more creative in how they support their suppliers, moving beyond simply measuring and looking for solutions, but also creating innovative places for them to be, for those solutions to be financed and move forward, almost like innovation hubs that they're creating that's a little bit broader.
Yes, it's absolutely true, but it was a journey. They recognize now very well the benefit of building a sustainable ecosystem. It's all about ecosystem or coalition. The challenge is so complex, so sensitive, that is, it should be a common goal, a common aspiration. And you have also some large players that feel really humble to innovators and startups, and they are looking for different players across the value chain because they feel that they have also to get fresh ideas and feel that everything is not blocked. And we see with Thibaut Vela shipping company coming into play, and I do believe that a lot of this is showcased here in ChangeNOW.
It's a beautiful thing about ChangeNOW. We do get to see a lot of really incredible examples. So it's a great place if you happen to be from one of the larger organizations to find and start to collaborate with some of these other solutions. There's this really amazing African proverb that if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, we go together. With that in mind, how do we shift from organizations working in silos on driving their value chain to working together and creating ecosystems? What would need to shift for us to move from that single vision to a together vision?
I think that we might need a long-term vision, because if you have the long-term vision, you are not really willing to grab your own optimized interest right now, but to see the benefit of building the sustainable ecosystem I mentioned. And this is the shift that we have to make. Another one would be to be consistent in the implementation, but because the major challenge is not the strategy to shift, it's really the implementation till the last mile, until the very small players across the ecosystem. And everyone should be responsible or should feel responsible for the entire chain, unless we will have some weaknesses and it won't change. It would be long-lasting change. So this is what we are at. But it's not always easy in those circumstances. And we have seen some players being back and forth to their commitments to sustainable progress. I do believe now that this is so complex and this is so obvious that we have to do it. It's increasingly unavoidable to shift. that it's at scale now.
I heard three things in what you said. The first was to think longer term. So we've got to stop thinking short term and start to think longer term. You've got to stay in the game and start to think about an ecosystem solution rather than an individual organizational solution. And those shifts should create a really big move. When we think about this in reality, what do we see needs to be in place for organizations to work as part of an ecosystem? Because it sounds like a really good idea in theory, but in practice, are there some key pillars that help us go from thinking solely as ourselves to starting to think broadly in terms of building ecosystems around us?
There's a lot of sharing behind, sharing data, not only vision, but data, and sharing efforts and investments, because it's heavy, and the different players have not the same resources. So this is also something to consider. And mainly, we have also time from the management, and time from the CPOs, and time from those kind of experts in a small organization is a great challenge. So this is also something to consider. But having sort of strong sort of hackathon or seminar where all the actors are in the same room with the same ambition is an efficient way of really unbugging some of the blocking points.
Wonderful. And we heard before from Elizabeth from Orange how important trust is. And I think you've just brought up if to build an ecosystem, we need to integrate conversations a lot more and start sharing data, then trust needs to be one of those pillars that we work strongly on.
Right. I would add that bringing some best practices or practices from different sectors of different geographies also help to change little bit the perspective and to see new solutions where the code was very stable those last years. So it's also a way to do it, bringing some fresh ideas from elsewhere, just to reflect on them and find a way.
I think it's really interesting that you say that. There's this beautiful saying that there's no such thing as a new idea. There's just new creative ways of putting together old ideas. So bringing in people who aren't necessarily the people you'd always think of to have included in an industry is really great as well. So we have unpacked a lot today, Marie. If there's one thing that you want people to take away from this room and this discussion that should guide how they go forth in approaching how they look at the value chain, what would that one thing be?
That one thing would be that it's not only common good purpose, but it's a strategic pillar of all the narrative, all the business models, if you will. I do believe I see that every day with our clients. It's strategic right now. The communication has changed and is a little bit shinier, I would say, but still they are working on it. It takes a long time. The cost of inaction is now higher than the cost of action. So we should also consider it as a strategic pillar of any kind of business strategy. And it means also a wider view, a systematic and long-term view.
Thank you so much for your time. Please give Marie a beautiful warm round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.